Hey everybody, welcome to the Dad Challenge Podcast, Sunday morning Bible stories with swearing. This is part 3 and the final installment of David is a Douche. The last part of his life is kind of like the rest of his life, and it's just war, always war. And so we left you off last time with when David becomes king and all the stuff that went down and his absolute level of douchiness that he did with Bathsheba, where he finds her on a roof having a bath. She's probably this hot and, you know, ruins her life, and then like is generally just the biggest douche ever for doing that. And so today we're going to finalize kind of the end part of his life and what happens next, and this whole idea of royalty and all the stuff that goes on, and just the sheer craziness that happens in the Old Testament. And so I'm going to skip over some of the stuff that's like, holy crap, it's just all war. Always something going on in his life. There's always drama, even though he's like this guy called by God. And so it's at the end, when I kind of tie it all together with kind of a little message of, I don't know, hope or something. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. So anyway, David is a Douche, part 3, the undoing of the douchiness of David. So David has a bunch of wives and a bunch of sons, right? Probably got a bunch of daughters too, but they only mention one. So you've got Amnon, Absalom, Adonijah, and Solomon. Okay. Amnon was the firstborn. Absalom was the super good secondborn. Absalom was the super good looking one. He apparently had like the best lettuce ever, like the hair, right? In the land. And Absalom had a sister who was fair, they say. So she's probably attractive, and I don't know why they have to say that. But anyway, Amnon gets into a fight with this sister Tamar, and Absalom is deeply offended. It's so crazy. There's already family drama going on. This is Kardashian drama all over the place, and which pissed off Absalom. And it must have been really bad, because the Bible says this. It says, it was a terrible feud that could only be quenched in the lifeblood of the offender. What did you say to her that literally her brother's like, this will end in your death? Like, don't forget that they're brother and sister, but royalty is different, right? Back in the day, they probably didn't, I don't know. They had different moms too, right? So all these wives had different kids, and they probably weren't together. It's probably like a gross, fundamental Mormon household where you see those things. You're like, there's no way that this is normal, right? And so I have an idea for parents though. If one of your kids pisses off the other kid, do this for me. Make them swear a blood oath of revenge that can only be quenched in the lifeblood of the offender. Film it for me and send it. I love to show everybody, right? So I'd be like, if you're pissed at your sister, then you need to swear a blood oath that you're going to destroy her till the end of time. It's just weird. Something happened. They don't tell us what happened. That would have been helpful. What the heck did he say? Anyway, it all just goes into this big thing where they all this big family barbecue, and Amnon gets hammered, okay? And Absalom's people, his followers, kill him because they thought that's what they wanted him. They thought, hey, we killed this guy for you. Remember that you hated him so much? We killed him for you. Happy birthday, right? And so he gets killed, which he's next in line for the throne. Even though we all know Solomon is going to be king, and David knows Solomon's going to be king, but he's still the firstborn, which is, you don't kill the firstborn, you just don't do it. It's just not done. I have one daughter of 4 of my kids, and she gets treated better than everybody else. She is definitely treated differently, and she gets, I don't know, it's just a different world. So the firstborn son is like that. They are literally the jewel of the family. So he gets killed, and Absalom paces out to his mom's house because he's scared his dad's going to kill him. David loves his kids. David is a person who loves people, like, genuinely, right? So riding his donkey in the wind, blowing his hair in slow motion, he's like, I'm out of here. He's crying because everybody hates him. And he's like, so maybe he's born with it, or maybe it's you're on the run for murder, right? You can just see his slow motion hair and his tears and his eyeliner blowing. He doesn't want to see his son's beautiful lettuce. He doesn't like him anymore. David's pissed, right? So Absalom gets pissed too, and it turns into like this Chad who's out for revenge. Like his daddy has like taken away his allowance and his trust fund and his Mercedes, and he begins plotting his takeover of the throne, right? Because he's next in line. He is, because his brother's dead. And so eventually something happens, and then David agrees to see him. That's what they say. So, but people keep forgetting that David is literally favored by God all through a time. The guy took down a giant when he was a teenager. He probably didn't even have pubes yet, and he took down the giant that no one wanted to take on. So he's been given this advantage of being prophetically informed that Solomon will be the next king. David knows this, right? And so Absalom, he's basically shit out of luck. Absalom he knows it too. He knows that Solomon's king. Everybody knows this. Everybody, it's like they know, but they still try to be like they're going to do what they can do, right? But he knows this, and so he starts planning a revolt. So he asks his dad if he can go to this place called Hebron to tell them about a vow that had been fulfilled or something like that. Like basically they send one of the royal family to say, this has happened, everybody celebrate. It's like politics, right? But so then he gets to this place, Hebron, and he announces that he's the king. He's like, hey, everybody, surprise, I'm the king now. And everybody's like, yay. Even one of David's wisest counselors vouched for this guy. So people were like, it must be real. And so basically he stabbed David in the back, this counselor guy, and this son is like king, or generally when they go to another area, they say they're king of that area until like war erupts and they figure it all out, right? So David's a crusty old man by now, and he hears this and he's crushed. Like his own damn son is killed. His other son is now revolted and he's declaring himself king, and it's like sadness. Like, remember in like the end of the last Avengers when Iron Man died? That's what he feels, okay? I love you 3000, David. Anyway, so he packs his shit and hires 2 men in a truck, basically takes his whole household, and he sets off. Because he's so old and sad that a fire exit is just, it's not gonna happen anymore. He's old now, he's like on a walker, he's like click, click. And so everybody's sad and crying and depressed. The whole kingdom feels his sadness. There's no anger, fiery, he's just like, so he climbs up some mountain of sadness and he finds out a guy who he loved was a traitor, which is that guy that vouched for his son to be king. And so he's all pissed again. So he hatches a plan to send Hushai, this one of his guys, to go trick Absalom to come back into the castle, and he basically goes undercover, right? And he's like, we need to figure this out. I don't think he wanted to be killed. He just wants to kind of like figure this out. David doesn't want his sons to die. And so David's on the road, you know, like old school way of slow trekking with his whole household, which means like probably hundreds of people in his army and everything else. And some dude from Saul's family comes out of his house. He's like, hey, asshole, starts throwing rocks at David and like swearing at him and like just like hating on him because he's Saul, right? And Saul's lineage hates David because David, you know, had him killed and he took over for Saul, right? Literally took the bloodline from Saul's family, and now David's bloodline is the king. So he's all pissed, some old buggery old man. And his guy comes up, he's like, let me just go kill this guy. You don't swear at a king and throw rocks. David's like, don't worry about it. He's just an old man, right? So David, even in his oldness, is like, yeah, don't worry about it. Meanwhile, Absalom enters Jerusalem, and Hushai was there to greet him, but Abs doesn't know Hushai, right? So he's like secret agent undercover, and he gains Ab's full confidence, right? So he becomes part of his crew, his dance crew, and they're all together, but he's like inside, so they don't know him. And they create a council. And the traitor asshole's on this council, and he says, you need to send 12,000 men after David and to destroy him. Like, David's army is small, but mighty. Like, you need to send double the amount of people after him. So Hushai tries to be like, nah, you don't need to do that. Just wait. Your dad's going to die soon, blah, blah, blah. But Absalom doesn't listen, and he sends 12,000 guys to go kill his dad. Like, what a douchebag. Like, I brought you in this world, okay? Have a little humility. Anyway, so Hushai sends him a Snapchat that's going to delete soon. So it's, you know, Snapchat, you send it and it like deletes. He's like, they're coming for you. So that happens. Dave gets away. Absolute is pissed about this whole thing. But he's like, now it gets all Game of Thrones. Then he goes into battle with his dad's army. He gets demolished, okay? And just like those movies, there's always that one guy that you're like, you can't wait till he gets killed, right? You cannot wait till he gets killed. And he starts running away on his horse. He's crying, oh, my army's defeated. And he's got his hair, his lettuce flowing in the wind. And it's like been his downfall because his lettuce gets caught in a tree. Horse takes off. He's literally stuck in the tree. David's guys find him and kill him. Literally died because his lettuce gets caught in a tree and he gets stabbed in the eye with a pole or something. So let that be a lesson, dudes. Long hair might be luxurious and flowing, but it'll get you killed someday. Man buns too. So David is now sad. His 2 sons are dead, and he's just like, oh my gosh, this is my life. Like, I try to be a good man. God, I love you. What's going on here? David's whole life has been war and murder and people he loves dying. Like, thanks. Maybe you could have chose someone else. Maybe sometimes he's probably sitting there thinking, God, why me? Right? A lot of us have that whole thing where some days we'll sit down and like, why me? What happened? What did I do? Right? It's just, this stuff is really hard to like square the circle because we'll never understand what God's thinking. But in the end, if we just kind of follow it, regardless of understanding it, it generally will turn out well. And that kind of happens here. So everyone comes groveling back, though. So David, everything's kind of set back to the allegiance is set, peace is restored. Even the dude who threw rocks and swore at him came in and said, I'm sorry, bro. And Dave's like, no problem, man. Right? So David's that kind of guy. And so I'm going to skip a bunch. There's just more war, just keeps going, and it's so boring. David's whole life has been war, and it's just, it says a lot that even though he was God's favorite person, that peace was never there for long. David was always battling against something. Biblical times were just, ew. I'm so glad we don't live there, but we have other problems, right? Anyway, David gets older, and there's some crazy national problems that make people realize that God was angry. right? God's angry. What's going on? Because there's a huge famine that happens for 3 years. Can you imagine the famine for 3 years? David's like, what's going on? He sends a bunch of people out to the cities and all the places and says, who's sinning? Who's like Tommy Boy, like, what'd you do, right?
What'd you do?
And he's trying to figure out what's going on because back in the day, again, God is there amongst the world. And if something's going on, there will be no peace. Stuff's going to happen. Famines, all these things happen because God is upset, right? He sends a bunch of people out and he realizes that the issue isn't the people. It's actually his own fault. A prophecy happened and they found out it was a lack of respect for the first king Saul and the persecution of the Gibeonites, who had been promised by Joshua that no evil would befall them, though under David's rule, evil befell them. Like, where is that in this, like the plot hole? They just threw that in. Oh yeah, it has nothing to do with all that. It has these other things. Well, I thought things were cool with Saul. I thought everything was like, that's biblical, it's all good. But that's not how God sees it. Right? And they just glossed over that. So plot hole. And so God's pissed about that. So David can't do anything about the Saul thing, right? It's over. So, but he tries to fix the issue with the Gibeonites, right? So, but it's weird because he promised them anything. He's like, look, I will do whatever it takes to make you guys happy. Sorry for what happened. They're being persecuted under my rule. What can I do to fix this? And they said, what you can do is we want all of Saul's lineage dead. All of them dead. Chop their heads off. We want them gone. That's their anger. That's their payback. But remember, David took in one of Jonathan's kids. Jonathan's his true bro for life, his ride or die, took him in, right? And so he sends all of Saul's family to die except for him, which is like, okay, but that's kind of the way it was. You promised something as a king, you have to do it. But he saved that one guy because he loved him, right? Loved him like his son. So all the lineage and princes from Saul's family were hung. So, wow. He's like, there you go. You get what you get. Let's move on. And so what a crazy political time to be alive. So thank God we just have like Twitter outrage and like canceling culture now because, well, unless you're Epstein, then it's biblical. So thank God we just live in a different time because that's like a time where you had to do crazy things and kill people just for like, oh yeah, you need that thing? I'll kill this guy for you. No problem. Cool. But it worked and peace was restored. But David being David made sure the princes had honorable funerals and like, thanks, man. You killed us, but here's a nice funeral. And then there was this other sin that David did where he missed some counting of lambs through some like thing, political, and God through plague killed 70,000 men. It was like thinking there's just so much going on in David's life that they gloss over these massive sins he's doing that kills 70,000 of the people in his community. So David has to fix all this stuff. So anyway, that's all done. That's all taken care of. And David's getting old. Like he's Biden old, right? He's hiding out in his basement and he just wants to chill, finish out his life, watching Netflix and like pinching nurses' bums, right? That's what he wants to do. And he knew Solomon was going to be king because it was prophesied and he was cool. He's like, cool, I'm at peace now. Everything's figured out and we're good. So he's just chilling. He's chilling in his basement like Biden. But then his spoiled son, Adonijah, I don't know what his name is, starts causing some shit, right? So he's like the Paris Hilton of the family, right? Adonijah's like every time he goes out somewhere, he has to have like a parade and he has to be celebrated like he's the heir to the throne because he's just a spoiled prince and he thinks that by flexing like this, people will see it and think that he's the next king. So it's all optics, right? And optics matter, especially back then. But Pretty Boy didn't want to die by hanging by his hair from a tree like his bro. So he thinks, okay, once dad's dead, then I'll figure all this out. And he reaches out to Joab to say, once he's dead, can you help me figure this out? And Joab's like, do you know who I am? I am your dad's ride or die. What are you, stupid? What are you, a dumbass? And so he approaches all these other guys that are loyal to David and they all turn him away. And so they're like, you're so stupid. What an idiot. So he throws a party and invites all of David's friends, all his dad's buddies and all the people that are loyal to him, except for those guys that turned him down. And he tries to like get them on his side. And this is the big party. So Solomon is not on the list either, right? Everybody knows that Solomon's going to be king here, but they're trying their best to do other things, right? They're just bored and rich and trying to figure out how they're going to get it. Nathan, the prophet, told Bathsheba to tell David what this guy was doing, what the son was doing. And so she tells him, and David's like, okay, frig, we got to figure this out. So David's been told that Solomon is the one. He knows this. It's been prophesied over. And so they send him, this is what they did. This is like, of all the things that you could have just done this earlier. They send Solomon on David's horse to the city to be anointed king. And that happens. Yay, there's confetti and stuff, and he's the king now. And that's all it took. Hey, here's my, because if you're on the king's horse, basically it's on, right? So he gets that, Solomon becomes king. Meanwhile, they're having a party trying to figure all this political stuff out. He's trying to get in people's ears, and they hear about it, and Adonijah gets sad and tells everybody to go home so he can cry in his bedroom. And he's like, oh, I can be king. He's just being like a spoiled brat prince. Solomon just reaches out to him and says, look, no harm, no foul. Just stop being a douchebag, okay? Let's just be brothers now. Can we do this? And so I guess everything's fine there. So David's about to kick the bucket, and he calls Solomon and tell him how to run the show. David's about to die. He's on his deathbed. He's like, Solomon's son, here's what you need to do. Make sure you do this, this, and this. And he tells him to be a good man. He tells him to say your prayers, follow God, and don't F it up, okay, man? Don't screw up what I've built, right? So that's kind of like the deathbed thing. So here it is. The end of David's life. He dies on the Sabbath. In the year 2924, 837 years before Jesus is born, okay? His reign lasted for 40 years. So David died around 70. He like today's style they're living. But to the Jewish people, King David is not dead. His memory lives on forever, and through the book of Psalms, you can just kind of read everything that David has written. But the book of Psalms are basically a book of songs written by King David, and is literally, to this day, one of the most incredible works of writing in the history of, writing. The Psalms are beautiful. Regardless if you believe in the Bible or not, you're not going to find something so well written. The Twilight series is pretty good. Harry Potter's pretty good. But the Psalms are just incredible. Because it's lamenting, it's celebration, it's sex, it's love, it's all this craziness that David went through all through the Psalms. And the Psalms are some of the most celebrated passages in history. They're always said at weddings and funerals. Psalms are some of the most celebrated parts of the Bible. And so that's what David wrote. That was his legacy. And that's why we still talk about him today. So that's what happened. They don't say how he died, probably just, got COVID. But basically, he lived this life. So there it is. That's David's life. And a few things come to mind here. So war, death, deceit, and general shit happens to David, even though he was loved and favored by God and prophesied to be king and given powers and this ability to have foresight where normal people wouldn't have it. He's loved, but he literally cannot escape the war and deceit and his sons dying, his friends dying, and people around him dying, and people stabbing him in the back. He doesn't escape it. So he's very popular and loved by everyone. And even though that's a thing, always going to be somebody coming after what you have. They're jealous. And this is a sad reality of the world we live in now. Power is always being attacked and I need power. Right now the US especially is in this crazy political fight where everybody's like, this is the end of it. It matters here the most. It's all about what's power. It always gets taken over like this. Power and people coming after power is biblical times. And what we see nowadays is the same thing that goes on. But no one can be perfect. And so even though he was blessed and called and did all the things God wanted him to do and lead an almost impeccable life of forgiveness and love and extended olive branches and saved people and didn't kill people when he was supposed to and all these things that kings are supposed to do, he was always loved, okay? He still did one of the douchiest things you could ever do. He stole a man's wife, and he had that man killed. And it just cannot be overlooked. And that's kind of why the story's called Dave's a Douche, because that is one of the craziest things that could have happened. And in today's world, if that happens, people go to jail, obviously, for the rest of their life. It's hard to square that, right? So he did something super bad. But here we are, still talking about King David, almost 3,000 years later. His reverence lives on. His glory, the things he did, his successes, his popularity, everything lives on to this day. Could you imagine having that kind of legacy? When I die, nobody's gonna remember me. YouTube is a great place to have this stuff, but I'm nobody. So there's lessons here we can learn. And I want you to hear me on this, okay? Even if you don't believe this stuff, and you're just here for the stories, that's cool. And most of you don't, okay? This is still important. No matter what you've done in this world, no matter who you've hurt, what you've stolen, lies you've told, people you've hurt, deceits you've perpetrated, you likely didn't steal someone's spouse and have them killed, okay? So you probably got that going for you. So know this, that there's always redemption for every single person. That you are loved, even if you don't want to be, even if you don't believe it, or whatever, or even if you don't think you deserve it, because a lot of us don't deserve it. None of us do, okay? but some of us feel like we don't deserve it. And trust me, every single person out there watching this with your eyeballs right now, I don't care what you've done, I don't care if you hate me, whatever it is, you deserve to be loved. Even if it's like, take God out of the picture, take Christianity. Every single person in this world needs to be loved. It is a human trait and characteristic built into our DNA or our soul or whatever you want to call it, that love is one of the most powerful, unexplained things as humans that we cannot fathom. And everybody needs it. And it's just, you can't deny it. So you are, like it or not, like it or leave it. David did some craziness in his life, and he's still revered as a man after God in spite of it all. A man that God loved a lot, and he's one of the main characters in the Bible where like everybody knows that God loved David. He's like the favorite child, and it happens, right? So be encouraged that nothing you did, do, or will do can ever take that away, regardless if you believe it or not, okay? Even if you don't want it, okay? So imagine this. Imagine you're a parent. I'm a parent. So parents out there, you'll understand this a little bit more. So those who don't have, let's say you have a pet. There's something that you love a lot in the world that, whatever, right? So let's say you're a parent. And no matter what your kid has done, right? Your kid did something stupid, right? They did something crazy. Like let's get to the extreme. Your kid, you've raised your kid, you've done the best you can with your kid, and one day they do something crazy. They accidentally, or they kill somebody. Do you stop loving your child? It is a really hard question. And the answer is generally no. It's still your kid. Let's say your kid does something less egregious, right? You never stop loving your child. That love is always going to be there as a parent. It's just crazy. So imagine that times a billion, trillion, million, zillion, grillion, zillions. God loves us more than we'll ever be able to fathom it. So no matter what we do, there will never be anything but that there for us. There's no animosity from God for what you've done in your life. There's no hatred. There's nothing like that. So even after you mess up, there's always redemption. Like you have a dog, you love your pet. There's a lot of fur parents out here, right? There's a lot of people who have fur babies. Your dog poops on the floor. Do you hate your dog? You love your dog. That's the way it is. I'm just saying, if we are capable of an incredible feat of love like that, like humans, right? How much more is God's love? It is literally unfathomable. Unfathomable. Hear it, okay? You or I, or any of the world's scholars or geniuses could never fathom it. There's no mathematical thing you can put together or psychological profile you could put together about this. You will never be able to understand it. And it hurts because you will never be able to understand it. And so be encouraged that you're never far from it, okay? It's always gonna be there. We'll never be able to understand it. Some of the stuff that goes on in the Bible and when we think about God and all this stuff, we can think of it from a human perspective, like, why would he do that? Why would he do this? We'll never be able to fathom it. That's part of the faith part of this whole thing, right? And that's really hard for people to understand. And I get it, right? And so sometimes it's like, if I don't believe that, if I don't understand that, can I still love Jesus and be a follower? Absolutely, you can. Okay, even if you don't believe it. If you believe Jesus is who he said he is, you're good to go. Okay? Like you don't have to believe everything the Bible says, like 100% blah, 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 blah. Again, you have to crack open the Bible. Okay? You don't have to. I encourage you to do so. I'm just saying you don't have to. So that's kind of, I hope that's encouraging for you, regardless if you want it or not. It's there for you. So if you don't believe that stuff, cool. If you're here for the story, I'm glad you stuck around for part 3 of Dave's a Douche. And we're doing Patreon is actually going to vote on the next story I tell. I've got a lot of great stories I want to tell. Well, the Bible has a lot of great stories that I would love to tell. And so I'm going to tell them. And if you're here for it, you're here for it. If you're not, that's cool too. But if you appreciate these, it's really cool to like and subscribe, hit the little ding, share it with your friends. Again, if you don't like Bible stories with swearing or swearing in your Bible stories, don't listen to this. Don't share it with those people that would get offended, or do. I don't care. I know a lot of pastors are listening to this, and if you're out there listening to this, I dare you to tell a story like this. I dare you to get real, because what I'm hearing from people is that I would never go to a church, but I'm here for these stories. I'm loving the way that this story is being told right now, and so I'm excited for you. There's a lot of cool humanness in all these things that can be brought out, even if you don't believe that stuff, even if you don't believe in God, who he is in God, or anything like that. There's a lot of great human things here that we can learn, right? So what's wrong with learning? I'm always learning. There's always things to learn. And there's a lot of hard questions that are going to need to be answered that I will not have the answers for, especially in future stories. Like, there's some future stories I'm like, how can this, I just can't square it. When we get into the story of Noah, it's going to be really hard to explain why God literally killed the entire world, right? It's going to be really hard to explain it. I'll try in my way, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this. Happy Sunday. This is our new church. This is YouTube Church. So maybe later I'll hop onto a live chat and we'll do some worship together or something. I don't know. I'll pop open the fire tonight and we'll do some worship. I think that'll be fun. Maybe I'll convince my wife to come out and sing too. We'll see. So thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate you. I really love that you guys are helping me grow this thing and it's becoming something crazy. And if you believe in God like I do believe that something has happened here, that He's set something in motion in a path that I cannot deviate from now. I don't care if anybody doesn't watch these, I'm going to tell these stories because I think they need to be told in a humanizing way, in a real relevant way for today's people who are just kind of done with traditions and old school ways of doing things. Sorry, boomers, this isn't for you. So thanks for watching, guys. I love you. You're amazing. Happy Sunday.
Light of the world, you conquer death. All of creation lifts up your praise. We stand to honor your glorious name. We gon' praise ya all of our days, 'cause great are